Hello, people of YouTube. This is Gray's Guitars. I am Steve Gray. Thank you for watching. Today we are talking about strings. I've done a couple videos about strings, but I haven't done one on flat wounds versus round wounds. So typically on most basses, guitars, you usually have what is called a round wound string. And essentially what that means is you can kind of feel the grooves in the string. The best example I can give is if I grab a guitar pick. So if you listen, I'm going to get closer to the camera and do it so you can see what I'm doing here. That kind of grippy-ish noise, if you will, that typically means you have a round wound string. Not always, but I would say 9 out of 10. Now a flat round string, which is not on this bass, and I don't actually have any instruments with flat round strings, will not make that noise. So what I'm going to do as an example, because the high E string on most electrics is not round at all, it's just one piece. If I slide this up and down, you don't hear that grip. So let's get close to you so you can hear the difference. So here's the E string with a pick. And then if I go to the low E string, you can hear that significant difference. Let's put that back down. So now what are the benefits? What are the negatives? What's the deal? Are they going to ruin your guitar? So first and foremost, throw that pick over there. Not typically will they ruin your guitar. So a flat wound string, because of its construction, will put more tension on your bass neck or your guitar neck. A lot of bass physicists swear by them. You know, they kind of want that jazzy tone, if you will, from back in the day. A lot of things were flat wound strings back in the day. It is going to put more tension on your bass neck. So I wouldn't recommend them if your truss rod is close to being maxed out, because it's going to put significantly more tension. You're going to get more of a U shape, more of a frontwards bow, and it's just going to keep getting worse and worse as you leave that string tension on the instrument, and eventually you are going to have some problems, which, if you look at my previous bass videos and neck trying to straighten a bass neck, I think that's ultimately what happened. I believe they didn't keep up with the maintenance on it. It just kept bowing and bowing and bowing. They left it, became unplayable, and I was unable to fix it and sold it to a guy that I believe will be able to fix that bass. And then later I found this neat little bass here. This is a 2000 Fender jazz bass. I think they call it Tobacco Burst or something. It's got a bird's eye maple neck, which is kind of neat. They're not spec'd for that this year, but just a cool little feature. But essentially they will put more tension on your guitar neck, on your bass neck, pretty much any instrument neck if you're putting a flat wound on it. What I would recommend if you really want them and you really got to have it is go down a string gauge. So let's say you have, I don't know bass gauge strings off the top of my head, but let's say you're rocking a 10 to 52. That's a typical, kind of mid-grade guitar string gauge. I would go down to maybe the 9 to 46. That might be better because ultimately it's going to put more tension. So the strings will not be as floppy. The strings will be stiffer. So that's something to keep in mind too. If you like kind of how your string movement is, if you go to flat wounds, they are going to be a bit stiffer, which is why I typically recommend going down at least a string gauge. Make sure your nut is still cut right. Sometimes different string gauges, you may or may not have to readjust your nut. Typically, if you're going up a gauge or down a gauge, you don't really have to do anything. But if it's something like extreme, like let's say the guitar was set up with 10s and you're going to put on 12s or 13s, then you probably need to have your nut filed to accommodate for the bigger string length. Same with the bass, same with the same thing. If you're going up or down a gauge, probably fine. But if you're going 2 or 3 gauges plus, then you're going to have to readjust this. You're going to want to adjust your truss rod and keep up with it because, as I said, the more tension, the more your neck's going to want to bend this way, the more problems it can cause. Same with guitars as well. It's the same across the line for pretty much any instrument. I debated about putting flat wounds on this because I need to buy new strings for this. I want to do a demo of this as well, a full-length demo. Use maybe a distortion pedal as well so you can hear it distorted. But it has old, crappy strings, and it wasn't strung up right, so it's a little buzzy in certain places. But ultimately, yes, you can have flat wound strings. They're going to be more tension going to be slicker feeling because you won't have, you know, that little grippy, that little bit of space in between each of the winds on the thicker strings. And some people like them, some people hate them. Most bassists like swear by them. They're like, yeah, get round wound, switch to round wounds. Me, I don't know if I'll hear a concernable difference. Apparently there is some sound differences, but ultimately with many things, guitar related, the second you put on distortion, I hate to say it cancels it out, but it really does. You crank the gain up, the minute changes become pretty much inconceivable. You can't even figure out what's what. On a clean channel, yeah. You know, if you're playing a bunch of jazz chords, jazzy things, and it's on clean the entire time, sure, maybe that's what you want. Maybe you want them on your acoustic. Acoustics, I'd be a little bit more hesitant about putting them on, being that they're all hollow construction, and same with all hollow body guitars, they're all hollow construction. And sure, you know, they're set up to take the tension to a certain extent, but, you know, over time, a lot of acoustics need a neck reset, and that may happen to you. Same with the bass. You know, if you got really heavy tension, your truss rod is close to maxing out, definitely don't put them on it. If you do, expect to have to replace your neck. So, you know, if you have a bolt-on guitar like this, it's called a bolt-on neck or screw-on neck, whatever you want to call it, by all means do it, because in a worst-case scenario, you can pop the neck off and put a new one on. Or maybe you know someone that can fix it for a couple $100. That is an option too. But if it's a set neck and you bow the crap out of it because you're using a heavy gauge flat wound string and the truss rod just can't take it anymore, then there's really nothing more you can do about it. You essentially have wall art and not really good. Will I put wound rounds on this? Flat wounds, rather. Probably not. I think I'm just going to go with the standard, probably the pink pack, because they're a little bit less tension, the pink pack. You know, I'm talking like Ernie Ball. That's something I put on a lot of my guitars. Nothing against Diodario. My local shop doesn't seem to want to carry them, unfortunately, and that's just the most convenient to drive about 5 minutes down the road to pick them up, and half the time he doesn't have them. So it's been Ernie Ball for a very long time. I think actually that Strat does have some older Diodario strings on it, and they're fine, and they play great, and honestly, between them and Ernie Ball, I don't really notice a difference. So if you hand me a pack of either, I'm not going to complain. But I think I'm going to stick with round wounds just because I have had some issues with jazz basses and Fender basses in general. This is actually technically my fourth Fender jazz bass. That's right, this is the fourth one, and I haven't really played the other three that I owned. I had a white P bass that I think you saw maybe in one video. I don't remember if I actually did a video of it or not. I think it might have just needed new strings, in all honesty. It had this extremely weird rattling noise. I don't know if it was a loose truss rod. The year was a 1992, if you're interested in the year. And I traded it for an exact same year, 1992, black jazz bass. And that jazz bass also had that same weird problem that just evidently annoyed the crap out of me. Maybe it was because the washers around the tuners were loose. I know both of them had that issue. This one, a little bit on the high E string, but the other ones are fine. You know, when I do restring this, maybe I'll pop the tuner out, put a little bit of glue in there, just to hold that down better. And then the third jazz bass, which was also in another black jazz bass, I think that was from around 2000 as well as this one. That one was the one that had the bow neck that I got for a solid price that I thought I could fix. And then that didn't happen. My clamp job didn't work. You're supposed to use clamps and heat. I just used the clamps thinking maybe, you know, it wasn't that bad. But as I said, sold it, disclosed the information saying there was something with the truss rod going on and it would need to get adjusted properly. You know, you'd have to do some work to it. And then the guy bought it from me. And it pretty much broke even on that deal. I think I did break even. When I bought it, because, you know, I bought it knowing there was an issue, thinking I could fix it, and I sold it. You know, you don't lie to people when you sell things if there's a known issue. This one, pretty solid. I think I'm going to keep it. I sold my Epiphone Thunderbird bass, had a little bit of regret, and then it was like, I have no basses anymore. I kind of want a bass. Saw this thing, threw out an offer that I thought was probably a little low for what they were asking, and then they were like, you know what, sure, we're going to take it. So this I'll probably keep, at least for a while, because I just love the way this thing looks. I love the bird's eye maple neck. It's not super heavy, and unlike the Thunderbird, which I did love the Thunderbird, I had that thing for almost a decade, don't get me wrong. I just didn't play it much, and the tuners were like up here, and I had to really fight to kind of go like this to tune the thing. But let's get back to the main point of this video, flat wounds versus round wounds. Will they ruin your guitar? Not typically. Or bass, yet again, not typically. It's going to ruin it if you don't pay attention to the truss rod and take care of that adjustment. If your truss rod is already close to maxing out, yes, it can ruin it. But if it's a good condition bass or guitar, nothing's wrong with it. As I said, buy a gauge down, at least at first. You can always go up later if you want to. So let's say you have the equivalent of, a guitar pack of 10s on it, the green pack, if you will. Go down to the pink pack when you buy the flat wounds, because then you'll have about the same even tension, give or take. You might only have to do minor adjustments. You might have to do the intonation a little bit down below, possibly string height as well. But ultimately, it will not ruin your guitar. And now that my light died, I don't feel like replacing it, so I guess we're just going to end the video. Hit that subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, leave a like, share, comment, all that good stuff down below. And until next time, as always, have a good one.